I think when I was becoming an artist, I decided I don't want to be a gallery artist. So now what do? So I decided to teach. And when I taught, I noticed that it was much easier to teach with materials than ideas. Like middle school was my age. And if I said, oh, come up with an idea, they were kind of frozen. If I said, here's a bunch of materials and we're gonna do a sculpture, they were on it instantly. So kind of that was the foundation of, oh, materials are kind of a key to this creativity for people who don't think they're artists.
I came to Remainders as a shopper. Back in 2018, I needed a small piece of fabric. I didn't want to buy a yard of fabric, that seemed silly. I was making a project around Christmas, and I needed, something about like that. And my thought was, you've got to be able to find fabric like that somewhere, and lo and behold, I found Remainders on the internet, and I went there and it was like, oh my God, this is perfect. That's all they had. I mean, they certainly had rolls and things like that, but it was a much smaller store then. At that time, it was like 900 square feet, really tiny, but they had tons of things. And it wasn't just this piece of fabric, but also any kind of art supply, any kind of anything. I was like, this is amazing, it's incredible. And the prices were super cheap. It was just perfect for an artist. I befriended the owner. Back then, she was running it by herself. She was at the front counter, and we just became friends. And she said, what are you gonna use this fabric for? And I told her I'm making like sort of a traditional jewelry tree in a frame, and I needed a piece of fabric. And she thought that was cool and asked if I would come and teach that class at Remainders. And so that's how it all began, just by buying that one little third of a yard of fabric.
When I moved to Pasadena, we lived up north for, when I moved to Pasadena, I was kind of done teaching, and I thought, well, I would really like to teach sewing or art, so I just kind of made a thing in my garage and told the neighborhood kids, and it was really fun. And then the next step was I would teach sewing, and moms would come with bags, and they had popped like 70 or 80 bucks on fabric, and the kids would start and they would be paralyzed because they were deathly afraid of cutting in to this new, expensive, it was so intimidating. So then I decided when I taught, I'm just gonna give everyone materials. I'm just gonna let them go through my fabric stash and let them do whatever they want and teach them to sew. And so that was way less stressful for all of us.
Often people find anxiety when they purchase a really expensive art supply and I want to try painting. I'm going to buy some paint. I'm going to buy some brushes. All of those things are expensive. A tube of paint is never less than $15 for a small tube. And once you get home with that anxiety sets in. Like, I spent all this money. I need to make something good with this. I don't want to waste it. I'm afraid to use it, or what I made isn't good because I've wasted it. I've wasted my money. Here, we remove that barrier completely. Nothing here is expensive. Everything, you can come and grab something, try it out. If it's not for you, if it wasn't something you were drawn to, bring it back, donate it back. It can have a full life cycle where it's not just sitting, not being used. And most of the things we have, another misconception is that the things we have are not good or not useful anymore, or the paint's dried up, or the ink's dried up, or the fabric's dirty. None of that is true. We get things that people have taken care of and loved and used, or not used, but sat and done nothing with. And so a lot of the things we have are brand new. A lot of the fabric we have is brand new. A lot of the supplies people maybe used a little bit, then sent it here, and we're just trying to redistribute that back out to the community. So that's definitely a misconception, is that people think, oh, well, it's dirty, like a thrift store. But actually, the opposite is true. People have taken good care of a lot of this stuff, and then they're passing it on. And that's what makes people feel good. I hear that over and over again. I'm glad that this will go to somebody that can use it. I'm glad that it will have another life outside of what I was doing with it.
It really became way more than I ever imagined in terms of the response. So whereas I was really inspired by the materials at first, for my own kind of excitement, I started getting inspired by the people. Like, oh, this is like something.
We have been really successful in getting the message out about what we do and where we are and how people can help. And people have gotten really excited about that. I think we sort of started out with, someone's parent would pass away and they had a hobby room and the child didn't know what to do with it, so they would bring it here in a U-Haul and say, will you take this stuff? Of course we will. This is stuff that probably sat in their hobby room, maybe got used, maybe didn't, but that's all stuff that can be redistributed and gotten into the community. So we take that in. And now we've been able to form a lot of partnerships with the studios around Los Angeles. And they also are now bringing us their stuff that they are done with on their productions or things that have sat in their storage closet. It's been incredible to see the type of things that have just been sitting around for ages not being used at all. And so all of that now we're taking in, and that has really resulted in these huge numbers of donations that we never would have expected before. Last year we kept 37 tons out of the landfills. In the last 3 months, we've taken in over 32 tons. So we're on track for another great year in that way, just taking in donations and redistribute them and keeping them out of the landfill.
I think the overarching inspiration for me is, number one, keeping things out of the landfill because there's such a ton of stuff, but then also helping people to develop their own creativity, especially people who don't think they're creative. I think it's really important for people, children, adults, everyone, to be able to develop their creativity because that's where solutions come from.
We're trying to save the planet, I guess is the most simple way, a very rudimentary way of saying it, but people throwing things away, the ideas around fast fashion and people not keeping things around, people buying new things instead of fixing things that are broken is really a huge problem in this world because all of that stuff has to go somewhere.
Any kind of creative activity is solution-oriented. Like, that's not the color I want, so I want to. They're all very small solutions, which I feel, when young people are learning how to solve problems, they're the ones that will go on and make incredible discoveries. It's not just artistic decisions, it becomes real problem-solving skills.
And the landfills are full, the landfills are off-gassing. There's just this huge problem that we're trying to help in our small way. Obviously 37 tons isn't gonna make a vast difference, but we're also not the only people doing this. So if there were reuse centers like ours in every state or in every large city, that actually could make a really great impact into keeping things out of the landfill.
When I look at when children are creating, adults in our classes, we try to do unusual classes where we're using a lot of different materials or things you wouldn't go to the art store and get. That problem solving is happening the whole time they're creating. And so then later, that's where the problem solvers come from in our generations. And will solve very difficult, very important problems. But I think being creative is the beginning of training to solve problems, climate problems, health problems. It's like a practice. So for me, when creative classes and activities started to be taken out of the schools, I felt very concerned because I knew that it was a practice to become more creative with difficult problems. So I feel like if that comes back, and it's starting to come back, and that's one of the motivations of having classes here, it's not so they can make something cute or beautiful, although that happens, it's because they're developing the skills to solve problems.
The Downtown to Uptown Challenge is on! Welcome to Downtown to Uptown, all you designers. You've got 30 minutes starting now to pick your materials from downstairs and remainders. You will have 6 hours to create your upcycled garment from start to finish. You've got to be done by 4 o'clock and ready for hair and makeup at Elite Beauty Bar. And then the fashion show starts at 6 p.m. where you will show it all off. Get ready, let's go.
My mom was a seamstress. My oldest sister was a seamstress. So they both taught me how to sew, generally speaking, when I was a kid. And I just legit hated it. I thought it was so boring because it was you grab a pattern, you grab the fabric, you follow the pattern, you make the final product, and it looks like the thing on the pattern, and I was so bored. But I drew a lot in high school. I was getting more into costume design, and when I went to college for musical theater, thought that's what I was gonna do. I was like the only person in the whole theater department who knew how to sew, so they were glad to push me into the costume shop and have me work on costumes for 4 years. But by the time I graduated, I was bored again, so kind of dropped off, didn't sew again for a long time. And it wasn't until years later, after doing a bunch of other stuff, that I was like, kind of want to like sew again. I kind of want to try that. But it felt very hard to get back into it, going from like no supplies. I didn't have a big budget at the time. And I was so afraid that I would just buy this expensive fabric and then mess up and waste all of it, and then feel guilty about wasting it and feel bad that I messed it up. And I was like, let's just avoid it.
Downtown to uptown challengers, 20 minutes left. 20 minutes, not 1 minute sooner.
It wasn't until I saw somewhere, someone was like, oh, I went to Goodwill and I just bought like a bunch of sheets for really, really cheap at Goodwill, and I made stuff out of them. I could just go get secondhand leftover materials and I can start sewing with that. Shortly after that, actually, my sister, who does not live in LA, told me about Remainders, and I was like, I'm sorry, what? A whole store of just the fabric and the supplies for secondhand prices? And that's when I started like hearing more about fast fashion and how much textiles being wasted every single year. And I was like, wait, all of that fabric that's at the regular fabric store for so expensive, even on sale, it's more expensive than here. When people don't buy it, it just gets dumped. It was refreshing to be able to remove myself from that and start something different for me and start using secondhand fabrics that there's no reason to get rid of them. There's no reason that these should be thrown away. There is definitely a pretty big movement into the upcycling, recycling, reusing. I have seen over the last couple years that is taking traction and it's getting bigger, which is amazing to see. There's not only a lot more small brands in the fashion industry that are focusing on sustainability, that are being very open about how they construct their clothing, how they pay their workers, where they get their materials from. But there's also just a lot of makers and designers and people who aren't even a business. Like, I'm not a business, I'm not selling clothes, I'm just making them for myself, but there's a lot more of these single people who are either taking thrifted clothing and upcycling it to be better for them, more stylish for them, something they'll want to wear longer, or who are starting to sew from secondhand materials.
After the garment's made, we need them to get down to Elite Beauty Bar, get in hair and makeup, and get that garment ready to walk the runway. Some of them brought their own models, some of them are modeling it themselves. It's just got to be ready to go by 6 o'clock when the fashion show starts.
Or just sewing in general, sewing your own garments in general is already like a huge pushback against fast fashion, because as soon as you start to sew something yourself, you have such a higher level of appreciation for what goes into that garment. And like, I'm not gonna sew something and then love it 1 second and dump it the next. I put my time and my effort into that, so I'm gonna keep it and I'm gonna wear it until it falls apart. Again, fabric is expensive and most people want to use secondhand materials. The desire for that is huge. A lot of people just don't have access for it. I think the trend would like explode upward if people had more access to secondhand fabrics and if less of them were going in the landfills and more of them were going to stores. The fabric that is going into landfills takes an insane amount of time to decompose. And I think people don't realize this because yes, some fabrics are faster, especially the natural fibers, cotton, linen, silk, wool, stuff like that. But that's no longer the bulk of the fabric we're using. The bulk of the fabric that is being used nowadays is polyester or some form of that has plastic in it. And that can take up to or even past 200 years to decompose. So you can't just be like, oh, cotton decomposes in like 2 years. It's okay. No, cotton is a small percentage of what's being thrown in these landfills. And it's something like 92 million tons right now that are going in landfills yearly of textiles, garments, and fabric that's just being dumped.
3, Megan, 2, 1. Except Megan is not done yet. Great job, you guys. Okay, I'll see you over at Elite.
I would really recommend to new designers, whether you're just making something for yourself or you're making a small batch of things to sell, whichever road you're on, there are secondhand options for you, and it's not limited. You can make stuff out of very small amounts of fabric to start with. This entire dress is made out of what we call remnants, which is generally 3 or 4 yards at most. Sometimes they're just half a yard. When you start mixing those together, you can make incredible garments out of that. And those are remnants that most people would just automatically dump just because they're too small. And if you don't have a remainders within driving distance, look online. There are resources out there. You might have to pay a little bit of shipping, but that is better than paying the high prices for the new fabric. And if you're trying to design larger quantities, if you're trying to start a small business for clothing, there are also options. That would be like dead stock. You'd take the fabric that businesses are going to dump in a landfill, and that's now being sold for cheaper, or in some places even being donated if you're really lucky. But then you can get massive rolls of fabric if you need to make multiple garments. A big amount of one type of fabric is available to you. Not brand new, not wholesale, but dead stock, secondhand, stuff that would have been dumped, and you can rescue that.
And Kimberly, thank you so much. This has been so much fun put together. And today I was there all day with the designers while they were making these gorgeous, amazing creations. So with that, I think, shall we start the show? Yay! Everybody ready? Yeah!
Hard to explain how you go from the flat pieces to the final garment because half the time you have no idea what you're doing. But you just start putting seams together that need to be together. And if you're lucky, it'll turn out like you originally wanted it. If you're even luckier, it'll turn out different, but you'll like it better, which is quite often what happens.